What he didn't realize was that I had already sensed the shift long before he delivered his grand performance. Betrayal has a smell to it, a quiet heaviness in the air that settles in your chest before your mind is ready to understand it. I noticed the way he avoided my eyes when he lied. I noticed the way he spoke too softly when calculating his next move. I noticed the way he tried to treat me gently, as if preparing me for a disappointment he thought I wouldn't survive. But I played along, giving him the illusion that his game was invisible. Sometimes the most powerful position you can take is pretending not to see what someone is doing, just to watch how far they're willing to go. When he delivered the moment he believed would shatter me, he waited for a reaction, anger, tears, collapse, anything he could feed on. But when none of that came, when I simply listened without breaking the way he expected, there was a flicker in his eyes. A flicker so fast anyone else would have missed it. Doubt. The quiet kind that a person tries to suffocate instantly. But it was there, and I saw it. He pushed it away quickly, straightened his posture, and continued speaking with rehearsed confidence. He wanted this moment to be the proof of his superiority, the moment he could look back on and say, "That's when I beat them." What he didn't understand was that defeat doesn't happen when someone takes something from you. Defeat happens when you give up the belief that you can rise again. And that belief in me was still very much alive. The strange thing was, instead of panic or sorrow, I felt an unusual calm settle over me. It wasn't numbness or shock, it was clarity. All the noise he had created, all the lies he had wrapped around me, all the shadows he tried to hide me in suddenly dissolved. I saw him for who he truly was, not the powerful opponent he believed himself to be, but a scared, insecure figure who needed victory over others to feel whole. He thought his triumph was complete. He thought he had stripped me of options, of allies, of strength. He thought my silence was the silence of someone who had been crushed. But my silence wasn't the end he imagined. It was the pause before a storm he didn't even know was forming. I stood there, listening to him describe his version of the world where he was the hero and I was the footnote, and all the while something inside me shifted. Not in rage, but in direction. Not in pain, but in purpose. In that very moment, while he believed he had ended something, something far more powerful was beginning inside me. I understood that I didn't need to fight him with the same desperation he used against me. I didn't need to expose him, confront him, or shout my truth to anyone. I simply needed to step back, watch him drown in the consequences of his own arrogance, and rebuild myself in ways he never expected. He assumed he had taken everything, but all he had really done was clear the path for a version of me that no longer feared him, no longer trusted him, no longer needed anything from him. He thought he won, but what he really won was the chance to witness the rise of someone he never believed I could become. The strange thing about his victory was how loudly he celebrated it, even though he believed I wasn't paying attention. While he walked around with the confidence of someone who thought he had destroyed every last piece of me, I quietly stepped back into the shadows he thought he had pushed me into. There's a particular kind of arrogance in people who win by manipulation. They assume the one they hurt will crumble instantly, that the story ends the moment they walk away with the trophy they stole. He carried himself like a man who didn't just win, but won permanently, as if my silence sealed the fate he had chosen for me. Little did he know that silence is not the end of anything, sometimes it's the birth of something far more dangerous. In the days that followed, he celebrated openly. He smiled wider, spoke louder, and strutted through conversations like someone who had unlocked an achievement no one else could match. People around him didn't see the lies beneath his confidence, and he used their admiration like validation for everything he had done. He believed I was gone, defeated, erased from the game. But while he was busy performing his victory for the world, I was watching from a distance, seeing everything he thought I was too broken to notice. That distance gave me clarity he never expected me to have. When someone betrays you, the first wave of pain is sharp, but the second wave, the realization that you now understand exactly who they are, is far more powerful. Every celebration of his became another lesson for me. every boast, every careless move, every moment he let his guard down because he thought the battle was over became another piece of information I quietly stored away. I didn't react. I didn't confront. I didn't show pain. Instead, I watched him reveal the weaknesses he had tried so hard to hide. Victory made him sloppy. Triumph made him unaware. And arrogance made him blind to the danger of ignoring the person he had pushed aside. The transformation inside me didn't happen in some dramatic rush, it happened gradually, quietly, like the slow tightening of a string. I felt my old self, the one who was shaken, confused, frozen in disbelief, start to fade. In its place grew someone with sharper vision, steadier thoughts, and a calmness that made even my own reflection look unfamiliar. Pain has a way of reshaping a person, not by destroying them, but by removing everything that was soft enough to be manipulated. He thought he had weakened me, but all he had done was burn away the parts of me that would have hesitated. In the days that followed, he celebrated openly. He smiled wider, spoke louder, and strutted through conversations like someone who had unlocked an achievement no one else could match. People around him didn't see the lies beneath his confidence, and he used their admiration like validation for everything he had done. He believed I was gone, defeated, erased from the game. But while he was busy performing his victory for the world, I was watching from a distance, seeing everything he thought I was too broken to notice. That distance gave me clarity he never expected me to have. When someone betrays you, the first wave of pain is sharp, but the second wave, the realization that you now understand exactly who they are, is far more powerful. Every celebration of his became another lesson for me. Every boast, every careless move, every moment he let his guard down because he thought the battle was over became another piece of information I quietly stored away. I didn't react. I didn't confront. I didn't show pain. Instead, I watched him reveal the weaknesses he had tried so hard to hide. Victory made him sloppy. Triumph made him unaware. And arrogance made him blind to the danger of ignoring the person he had pushed aside. The transformation inside me didn't happen in some dramatic rush, it happened gradually, quietly, like the slow tightening of a string. I felt my old self, the one who was shaken, confused, frozen in disbelief, start to fade. In its place grew someone with sharper vision, steadier thoughts, and a calmness that made even my own reflection look unfamiliar. Pain has a way of reshaping a person, not by destroying them, but by removing everything that was soft enough to be manipulated. He thought he had weakened me, but all he had done was burn away the parts of me that would have hesitated. He continued believing he had nothing to fear from me. He assumed that the absence of noise meant the absence of strength. Every time he walked past me without a second glance, every time he dismissed my presence as irrelevant, he fed his own illusion that he had risen above me permanently. What he didn't realize was that his celebration created the perfect cover for my rebuilding. No one suspects the person who stays quiet. No one sees the one who doesn't argue, doesn't react, doesn't fight back, until it's far too late. During this period of silence, I learned more about him than I ever had before. I saw how desperately he needed control to function, how dependent he was on admiration, how terrified he secretly was of losing his status. I noticed the way he constantly checked who was watching him, how he repeated his victory story to anyone willing to listen, how he exaggerated details as if trying to convince himself it had all been righteous. People who are truly victorious don't need to keep retelling the story. Only the insecure do that. Only those who fear the truth coming out rehearse their lies over and over again. While he tried to strengthen his image, I was strengthening myself. I rebuilt the parts of me he tried to dismantle. I reconnected with my purpose, reshaped my mindset, sharpened my focus. I stopped needing his approval. I stopped caring about the image he had crafted of me. I began to see the world beyond him, a world he thought I no longer had access to. What he didn't understand was that the silence he mistook for defeat was simply the quiet before I learned how to fight in ways he had never prepared for. My transformation wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It wasn't dramatic, it didn't need an audience. It wasn't fueled by rage, it was fueled by clarity. I became someone who no longer reacted emotionally to his moves, someone who no longer felt the need to justify anything, someone who no longer felt the weight of his shadow hovering over me. He walked around convinced that he had ended my story. He never realized that while he was celebrating his so-called victory, I was quietly rewriting the next chapters of my life, each one stronger, sharper, and more powerful than the last. The transformation he never saw, the transformation he never imagined I could undergo, became the foundation of everything that would eventually turn his illusion of victory into the biggest mistake he had ever made. Patience is a strange sort of power, one that most people underestimate because it doesn't roar, doesn't fight back immediately, doesn't move the way anger does. He believed my silence meant I was frozen, broken, or simply too weak to do anything. What he didn't realize was that patience is the weapon of someone who has stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking strategically. While he walked around convinced he had crushed me, I was learning to use the stillness he mistook for defeat as the place where I could gather every scattered piece of myself and sharpen them into something he would never see coming. There is a difference between someone who reacts and someone who waits. Reaction is driven by emotion, waiting is driven by intention. I watched him closely during those days when he assumed the story was already over. I observed how he moved, how he talked, how he hid his guilt beneath confidence, and how quickly he grew careless because he believed there was no longer a threat. People who think they've already won stop paying attention to the details. They stop protecting themselves. They stop watching for the consequences of their own actions. And in that arrogance, they reveal the cracks they tried so hard to hide. I didn't push back or confront him, not because I was afraid, but because I understood that timing matters more than reaction. A response given too early is wasted. A move made too quickly is predictable. So I kept my distance, allowing him to believe he had full control. Every time he asked him. Patience allowed me to gather information he never intended for me to know. While he celebrated, I listened. While he boasted, I observed. While he made decisions thinking no one was watching, I took note of every flaw in his plan, every lie he reused, every shortcut he took. I began to understand him not emotionally, the way I once did, but psychologically. I understood the currency he valued most: attention, admiration, superiority. I understood the thing he feared most: being exposed for what he truly was. And once you understand what someone values and what someone fears, you hold the most powerful position in the room. The world sees patience as passiveness, but it is anything but that. Patience is pressure applied slowly. It is the quiet tightening of a rope while the other person is too distracted by their own ego to notice. He didn't notice how my demeanor changed, not dramatically, but gradually. He didn't see the steadiness in my eyes that replaced shock. He didn't notice how my silence became less of a reaction and more of a choice. When someone truly breaks, their silence is heavy, desperate, defeated. But my silence grew lighter, clearer, almost intentional. And yet he didn't see it, because he wasn't looking closely. People who believe they've won don't feel the need to study their opponent anymore. There were moments when I wanted to confront him, to reveal that I already saw through everything, to tear apart the lies he built with nothing more than truth. But impatience is how people like him survive. They provoke you until you react, and then they use your reaction as proof that you were the problem all along. I refused to give him that satisfaction. My silence denied him the victory he truly wanted, not the victory of taking something from me, but the victory of watching me fall apart over him. He didn't get that. Instead, he got a version of me that was studying him with the same calmness a hunter uses while watching prey circle the wrong direction. While he believed the battle was over, I was preparing for the war he didn't know existed. My patience wasn't passive, it was deliberate. It allowed me to rebuild quietly, in ways he never noticed. I reconnected with the people he tried to isolate me from. I strengthened the skills he underestimated. I planned my next steps without the emotional fog he had once created around me. And with every passing day, my patience became a sharper weapon because he kept giving me more reasons, more information, more openings. He began making decisions that revealed his insecurity. The louder he spoke about his victory, the more obvious it became that he feared it wouldn't last. The more he tried to convince others he had done nothing wrong, the more evident it became that guilt was eating at him. But guilt is never quiet, it finds its way into gestures, tones, careless words uttered in moments of arrogance. And because I wasn't reacting, he didn't notice he was exposing himself. He thought I was too silent to see anything. He didn't understand that silence allows you to hear everything. Patience taught me to understand him better than he understood himself. It taught me to wait for the moment when he was most vulnerable, not because I wanted to hurt him impulsively, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of his own actions collapsing around him. Revenge built on anger fades quickly, but revenge built on patience hits with precision. And the longer I waited, the clearer everything became. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to prove anything. I simply needed to give him enough time to dig the hole he believed was meant for me. He mistook my patience for weakness, but what he didn't know was that patience was the reason he would never see the moment everything shifted. Patience was the quiet force shaping the outcome he thought he controlled. And the deeper he sank into his illusion of victory, the more powerful my position became, until the day when all his confidence would tea. Turning my pain into strategy didn't happen instantly, it happened slowly, like a transformation I didn't even realize was taking place at first. Pain has a way of clouding your thoughts in the beginning, making everything feel heavy and disoriented. But once the shock wears off, once the betrayal settles into your bones, something else begins to emerge beneath it, a clarity, a sharpness, a desire not for chaos but for direction. I stopped asking why he did what he did, stopped replaying his words in my mind, stopped trying to understand the kind of cruelty that disguises itself as intelligence. Instead, I started asking myself a different question: what can I do with this pain he left behind? Pain is energy. It doesn't disappear, it transforms. And the moment I understood that, everything inside me began to shift. I realized I could let this pain consume me, or I could shape it into something he never expected. So I did what he never imagined I would do: I didn't drown. I didn't collapse. I took every piece of hurt, confusion, anger, and humiliation and began molding it into a weapon he could never defend against. Not a loud weapon, not one fueled by rage, but a quiet, calculated weapon built from clarity and purpose. I looked at myself honestly, more honestly than I ever had before. I examined the parts of me that he exploited, the vulnerabilities he targeted, the blind spots he used to mislead me. Instead of resenting myself for them, I studied them. I understood where I had been too trusting, where I had ignored my instincts, where I had allowed my emotions to guide me blindly. It wasn't self-blame, it was self-reconstruction. The pain he caused forced me to confront parts of myself I had avoided for years, and in doing so, I discovered strengths I had never realized were there. I started rebuilding piece by piece. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with intention. The old version of me, the one who would have reacted impulsively or emotionally, began fading away. In its place grew someone who understood the value of timing, the importance of observing quietly, the power of studying an opponent rather than attacking them blindly. Pain sharpened my instincts. It made me more aware of the things people say without words, the emotions hidden behind confidence, the lies buried beneath rehearsed speeches. He thought he broke me, but all he did was open my eyes wider than ever. I began seeing patterns in his behavior, patterns I used to overlook because I trusted him. I noticed the way his arrogance grew every time someone praised him. I noticed the way he spoke about me when he thought I couldn't hear. I noticed the strategies he used on others, the manipulation he carried like a second language. Pain made me pay attention, and attention is the most powerful tool anyone can have in a battle like this. He wasn't careful anymore, he wasn't hiding anything. And every careless action of his became another piece I could add to the strategy forming quietly in the back of my mind. Rebuilding myself wasn't just about becoming stronger, It was about becoming smarter. I realized revenge isn't about returning what was done to you, it's about ensuring the other person faces consequences in a way that dismantles the illusion they built around themselves. And for that, I needed to be stable, grounded, and unshakable. So I focused on myself. I focused on my growth, my skills, my independence. Every time he underestimated me, it gave me more room to grow unnoticed. Every time he dismissed me, it gave me more freedom to plan. I stopped needing people to see my pain. I stopped needing validation. I stopped needing anyone to understand what I was going through. Pain taught me that healing doesn't need an audience. Strength doesn't need applause. And strategy doesn't neigh. Slowly, the pain transformed into determination. And that determination shaped itself into a plan, not one built out of desperation, but out of intention. I didn't want petty revenge. I didn't want a moment of satisfaction. I wanted something lasting, something that would touch the core of who he believed he was. I wanted him to face the truth, that his victory had not made him powerful, it had made him predictable. That the person he thought he defeated had become someone far more dangerous than the one he betrayed. There came a point when I could feel the shift inside me. The pain was no longer heavy. It no longer controlled me. It no longer clouded my thoughts. It became fuel to think sharper, move smarter, and rise higher. I no longer flinched at his name. I no longer replayed what he did. I no longer felt the sting of his betrayal. I looked at what he had done and saw not destruction, but opportunity. An opportunity to rebuild myself without the blind trust that had once weakened me. An opportunity to rise without the shadows of my past slowing me down. An opportunity to craft a version of myself he could never manipulate again. Pain, in the end, became the architect of my rise. It taught me how to plan without emotion clouding my judgment, how to wait without losing focus, how to understand someone without letting them control me. And the more I rebuilt myself, the more I realized that every moment he thought he was winning was actually preparing me for the moment he would lose everything he believed was his forever. The moment I struck back wasn't a sudden explosion, it was the quiet result of everything he had overlooked, everything he had dismissed, everything he had believed about me that was never true. People like him expect revenge to be loud, impulsive, emotional. They expect screams, accusations, dramatic confrontations. They prepare for chaos because chaos is easy to point fingers at. But they never prepare for precision. They never anticipate th. What made that moment powerful wasn't the act itself, but the timing. Timing is everything. He had grown comfortable, careless, almost lazy in his arrogance. By then, he believed the story had moved so far in his favor that nothing could shift it again. He no longer monitored the things he once protected. He no longer watched his words. He no longer questioned who he could trust, because he believed he already controlled everything. That confidence became the opening I needed. When someone stops paying attention, when they stop guarding their weaknesses, when they start walking through life convinced they can't be touched, they become vulnerable in ways they can't even imagine. I didn't need to expose him with anger. I didn't need to embarrass him with shouts or arguments. I simply needed to allow the truth he had hidden for so long to rise to the surface. The truth always has a way of suffocating lies when the timing is right. So I positioned myself carefully, watching every pattern, every move, every careless word he let slip. Even the smallest details mattered. He didn't know that I knew his secrets. He didn't know that the same people he manipulated without guilt were growing tired of his games. He didn't know that the image he worked so hard to maintain was already cracking from the pressure of his own ego. The moment I struck back felt like releasing a breath I had been holding for far too long. I didn't attack him, I revealed him. I didn't destroy him, I let his own actions do that. The structure of lies he built with such confidence collapsed under the weight of truth. And the beauty of it was that I didn't have to push it down. I simply removed the support he had taken for granted. Everything else fell on its own. His voice, once so loud, suddenly stuttered. His confidence, once overflowing, began to drain. His allies, once loyal, started questioning him. And he had no idea who had shifted the world beneath his feet because he had never imagined I had the stray. When the consequences of his actions started unraveling around him, his shock was almost poetic. He looked at everyone else first, trying to figure out who turned against him, who betrayed him, who exposed what he had spent so long hiding. It never crossed his mind that the person he thought he had defeated was the one responsible. That's the thing about underestimating someone, you give them the perfect invisibility. I used that invisibility as a shield while I planned, and as a weapon when the time came. The most powerful part of that moment wasn't watching him fall, it was realizing how little effort it took once I stepped into the strength pain had forged within me. All those years he believed he understood me, believed he could predict my reactions, believed he could control my emotions, had blinded him to the truth. I was no longer the person he betrayed. I had grown beyond the version of myself he tried to break. And because he never saw that transformation, he never prepared for the version of me that would eventually confront him. He tried to regain control. He tried to twist the narrative. He tried to regain the admiration of the people who once blindly followed him. But this time, nothing worked. His confidence sounded rehearsed. His excuses sounded weak. His lies collapsed the moment they were questioned. Without his image, without his manipulation, without the illusion of superiority he relied on, he had nothing left to stand on. And I didn't need to lift a finger to destroy him. His downfall was shaped entirely by the truth he had been running from. Watching him scramble, watching him panic, watching him realize he no longer had the power he once used so carelessly, wasn't satisfying because he suffered, it was satisfying because he finally saw himself without the mask. He finally felt what it was like to lose control, to be exposed, to be vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, he finally understood something he had never understood before, the person he'd. My strike wasn't a single action, it was the culmination of every choice I had made since the day he betrayed me. Every moment of silence, every careful step, every piece of information gathered, every shift in my demeanor had led to this point. And he never saw any of it because he was too busy celebrating his imaginary victory. He believed I had nothing left, but I had something he never accounted for: patience, clarity, and the strength to let him ruin himself. When the moment finally unfolded, the world around him changed. His voice no longer controlled the room. His presence no longer demanded attention. His lies no longer shaped the truth. And as everything he built came crashing down, I realized that my revenge wasn't about taking what he had, it was about ensuring he had to face the reality he spent so long running from. He lost not because I struck him down, but because he never saw the moment coming, never believed I was capable of it, never imagined that the person he dismissed so easily would be the same person who would quietly dismantle everything he once stood on. When he finally began to realize everything slipping out of his hands, it wasn't because I confronted him or exposed him in some dramatic explosion of anger. It was far more subtle, far more unsettling, because the truth is, people like him aren't defeated by force, they are defeated by the weight of their own arrogance. He moved through life believing the world owed him submission, believing that his charm and manipulative confidence could bend anyone into silence. He thought consequences were things that only happened to other people, never to someone as clever, as calculating, as untouchable as he imagined himself to be. And that illusion held strong for a long time, stronger than it ever should have, because he genuinely believed he had taken everything from me that would make me capable of fighting back. What he never understood was that survival doesn't require perfection, it requires awe. What truly began his downfall wasn't the moment I took action, but the moment he underestimated what silence can hide. He assumed I had moved on, disappeared into the shadows he'd pushed me into, carrying the weight of humiliation he thought he had permanently stamped onto my identity. But silence is not surrender, silence is observation, preparation, and the slow gathering of strength that doesn't make noise because true power never needs to announce itself. While he grew bolder in his carelessness, convinced that no one would ever hold him accountable, the gaps in his armor widened. His allies began to doubt him, not because of anything I said, but because of what he did. His foundation began to crack, not because I attacked it, but because it was built on lies he could no longer keep straight. His relationships soured, his reputation weakened, his influence shrank, and yet he had no idea why it was happening. He blamed luck, he blamed timing, he blamed people he thought were plotting against him, never realizing that the only enemy he ever truly had was his own ego. When the moment finally came for me to move, it didn't require a grand gesture or a dramatic confrontation. All it required was a gentle push at the exact point where he was already unstable. I didn't have to invent his failures, he had already created them. I didn't have to exaggerate his flaws, he displayed them openly. All I had to do was make sure the right people saw the truth he worked so hard to hide, and once they did, the empire he thought he controlled began to collapse in ways he couldn't stop. The people who once believed his lies stepped back. The ones he manipulated learned to see through him. The ones he underestimated began to rise above him. And slowly, painfully, inevitably, he started losing everything he believed was permanently his. Opportunities vanished. Support evaporated. His control over others slipped through his fingers. His confidence cracked under pressure he never expected. What he lost in the end wasn't just material or social, it was the identity he built on power, manipulation, and the belief that he was untouchable. He had spent so long standing on top of others that he didn't know who he was without the height. He had spent so long feeding off the weakness of people he hurt that he didn't know how to survive once they stopped letting him. The downfall he experienced felt like betrayal to him, even though the only person who betrayed him was himself. Every lie he told was a debt he eventually had to pay. Every betrayal he committed was a fire that eventually circled back to burn him. Every victory he celebrated at someone else's expense was a seed of destruction he planted in his own life without realizing it. And the most ironic part of all was that I didn't need to destroy him. I only needed to stop protecting him. I only needed to stop giving him the benefit of doubt. I only needed to stop carrying the weight of the harm he caused. Once I let go, once I stepped back and let the truth run its course, the downfall he experienced was one he built with his own hands. He thought I came for revenge, that I had orchestrated his losses, that I had attacked him with the same cruelty he once used against me, but the truth was far simpler. He didn't lose because I hated him. He lost because he underestimated me.